morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, I want to be taking a look at a deck which has been flying under the radar and seeing a little bit of success here and there for a little while. It's time we actually gave it the spotlight it deserves. It is Omastar and Gengar and Mimikyu. Now, Alex Schmenske, who is in fact an incredibly good player, played this to a 50th place finish in day 2 of the Pokemon TCG World Championships, and that was in a brand new format where we didn't really know everything that was going on. So we should be able to update this and turn it into a deck which hopefully is going to be absolutely relevant moving forward. And it only plays 6 Pokemon. That's it. 6 Pokemon. But you see, it kind of has to, because it revolves around Omastar. Now, Omastar has a frankly phenomenal ability, whereby if you have fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, they cannot play any item cards from their hand. Now, it is fewer than, not the same as, or fewer than, so we do have to be a little bit careful here that we don't end up having 2 and our opponent has 2, and that's the real challenge of the deck. But as long as we can make sure that we've got, say, 2 and our opponent's got 3, we're fine. I mean, if we take something like Reshiram and Charizard, most of those are going to want to put down a Ninetales, and then they're probably going to want to put down a Volcanion, and then they're going to need a Reshiram and Charizard. But the problem is they're going to want to keep using Reshiram and Charizard, so they're going to keep having 3 Pokemon out, and we're going to be fine. And you do have to go light here. Now, that's the only Pokemon we play that isn't Gengar and Mimikyu. We play 4 copies of Gengar and Mimikyu, 2 copies of Omastar, and one of those should sound really weird. We'll get to it in a moment. So Gengar and Mimikyu then. For 2 Psychic Energy, it does 50 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand. Now that is trainer card. That is items, supporters, stadiums. It is all of them added together. We're not just talking item cards. And that adds up very quickly. But of course, what your opponent tries to do when playing against Gengar and Mimikyu is to get as many trainer cards out of their hand as they possibly can, so that you can't take advantage of all the trainer cards in their hand. But if they're item locked, that becomes significantly more difficult. It also means they're not going to be using stuff against you like Custom Catcher. They're not going to be using stuff like Poker Gear to search out there, or I say search, it's not search per se, but it's kind of like a soft search to get all their supporters out. They're not going to be using cards like Cherish Ball to go and search out their Pokemon. So they're going to have a much rougher time just setting up, just putting Pokemon in front of you that can actually have a good go at taking you down is going to be significantly more difficult for them, because they're just not going to be able to get rolling. It's kind of hard to welder every turn if you don't have the energy, and if you can't play Fire Crystal, and you can't play Fiery Flint, yeah, sure, you can still play Giant Half, but that's assuming you've got Giant Half. And you're not going to be able to find those supporters as easily. You can still play them, but you're going to end up with a hand clogged full of supporters. And when you've got a hand clogged full of supporters, I mean, Gengar and Mimikyu, right? If you've got 6 trainer cards in hand, Gengar and Mimikyu will one-hit KO absolutely anything. Something like a Pikachu and Zekrom, it's actually reduced down to 5. And that's a general conceit of the deck here. Try and make sure that your Omastar is out. You've got fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, and then for 2 energy, you're just hitting 50 damage for every trainer card in their hand. They can't play item cards, and you sweep to victory fairly quickly. And this is a deck that will have some quick wins. And what is absolutely beautiful about this is that your opponent will just have to sit there, not really being able to do anything, while you're just one-hit KOing everything. It means that if you lose game 1, you can win a quick game 2 and then go to game 3. Now, in terms of energy, you're just playing a few Psychic Energy. It's purely for Gengar and Mimikyu. You're not worrying about Omastar. But we need to have a look at the trainer line here, because I told you we're just playing 2 Omastar. We're not playing any Omanite. And we're not playing maxis because firstly, it rotated out, and secondly, even if it hadn't rotated out, it got banned and expanded. That would be a great way to get Omastar out, but no, ladies and gentlemen, that's not an option. So what are we left with? And the answer is unidentified fossil and rare candy. And that's it. That's what we go for here. We play down unidentified fossil, which does count as a Pokemon when it's played. And then you can rare candy it into your stage 2 Omastar, and you're off. And that's how the deck works. That's how you get set up. It is a weird way to go about doing so, but honestly, that's the way we have to do it. That's the only way we're going to make it work. Now, that also really influences our supporter line here, because our main supporter, at least in the early game, is going to be Green's Exploration. You got to have no Pokemon in play with abilities, and then you search for any 2 trainer cards. And okay, this becomes a dead card in your hand once you've got Omastar out, because Omastar has an ability. But until you get Omastar out, go for it. You're absolutely fine. And you can search out your unidentified fossil. You can search out your rare candy. You can search out everything else. It's very cool. We also see Bill's Analysis here, because that's just another really good card for actually getting item cards or trainer cards out of your deck. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck, reveal 2 trainer cards, put them into your hand, shuffle the other cards back into your deck. Really nice for digging for these item cards, which you are going to need in the early game. Speaking of the early game, please remember that Gengar and Mimikyu's GX attack for 1 energy stops your opponent playing any cards from their hand during their turn. They can use whatever's on the board, but they cannot play any cards, and that can be a nice early game option to give you just another turn to set up. For 2 energy, it also forces your opponent and you to draw until you got 7 cards in hand, which can be good, but you don't really want to give your opponent an advantage. So you use it with the drawing right before a big poltergeist, guarantees your opponent's got, 8 cards in hand, time they draw for their turn. But then, in the early game, this can just buy you some time to do all the setting up. The other supporter we find here is Coach Trainer, because Coach Trainer draws 4 of your active Pokemon as a tag team. You are going to start with Gengar and Mimikyu. Like, I can say with 100% certainty, you are going to start with Gengar and Mimikyu, because the only basic Pokemon you play is Gengar and Mimikyu. You literally cannot start with any other Pokemon. Cool. But there are a few other things in this deck which should jump out as a little bit of a surprise. Like Surprise Box. Put a card from your opponent's discard pile into their hand. Well, this one doesn't take a huge amount of figuring out. You find a trainer card that your opponent is just not going to get much advantage from, and then you put it in their hand so you can do an extra 50 damage with your attack. That sounds pretty good. We also see 4 copies of Mixed Herbs here. If you play 1, remove a special condition. If you play 2, heal 90, and remove all special conditions. But bearing in mind you're playing stuff like Bill's Analysis, which will help you to find this. It's good for healing. You don't want to be giving up your tag team GXs, and it takes 2 energy in a deck that doesn't play energy acceleration. That'll work quite nicely. We see 2 copies of Peking Red card. Your opponent reveals their hand. You may have your opponent shuffle those cards into their deck and draw the same number of cards. Well, that's actually brilliant, because if you look at your opponent's hand and you find out that they've got 1 trainer, make them reshuffle. Hopefully they'll get a bunch more. And then we do see Choice Helmet here. You take 30 less damage from EX and GX Pokemon. And between this, your Mixed Herbs, and the fact that you are just slowing the game down and hurting your opponent, you should be able to survive a little while with this deck. Now the rest of it's a little bit more standard. We've got Pokegear just to search out our supporters, to find them a bit more easily, like we said earlier. We've got 2 Great Potion for a little bit of extra healing. We've got 4 Custom Catcher, which is just your general gusting option. Most decks play it. It's fairly standard. We've got 2 copies of Cherish Ball to search out your tag teams, and 2 copies of Pokemon Communication to try and get yourself, well, Omastar generally. Pokemon Communication isn't usually great in a deck that plays 6 Pokemon, but what you can do is use Green's Exploration to search out a Cherish Ball and a Pokemon Communication, and that will work. Couple of Energy Spinner just to find your energy. You're not playing many, you need to find them so you can get attacking. 1 Reset Stamp, because it's Reset Stamp, it sees play in every deck, slows your opponent down after a fast start. And then when we look at stadiums, there's 1 copy of Lysander Labs. Most people play this just as a counter to Escape Board and Jirachi, because Jirachi's amazing, sees a huge amount of play, so it's quite nice to have an answer to it. Jirachi goes to sleep and is a 1-cost retreater. Escape Board will fix both of those problems, but if you stop it doing anything, haha, gutted. And then Power Plant, because you're not using GX abilities, but Mewtwo and Mew is huge. So many people are playing Dedenne. It really is a big thing at the moment, so you can turn them off, and that's lovely. It's going to be interesting to see whether this deck can survive and carry on for a little while. But what I will say is that the deck clearly has a lot of potential, and it's clearly a very fun deck that can counter some of the metagame at the moment. But at this stage, I'd like to know what you think about the deck, so let me know in the comments section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.